I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of betrayal, but I never expected to hear my own death sentence. Standing in the hallway of our massive 7,000 square foot estate in Calabasas, I froze as my husband's voice drifted through the door, promising his mistress my life and my home by sunrise. The man I shared a bed with wasn't just planning to leave me, he was calculating exactly how to make me disappear forever. By lunchtime the next day, my mother-in-law received a call from the hospital that shattered the world we knew. Her son had been in a terrible car accident. Both my in-laws were petrified on the spot. If I hadn't heard it with my own ears, I probably would have believed until my dying breath that my husband was a decent man. But that night, amidst the tomb-like silence of our 7,000 square foot mansion, I heard his voice. "Don't worry, my love," he said. "I will make sure she's gone. The house and all the money in the bank, as soon as I take care of her, it will all be yours." The person saying that was my husband. My name is Sarah. I was 32 years old and worked as an accountant for a small firm in the city. My husband, Jason, was 3 years older than me and ran his own company. Business was going reasonably well for him. We had been married for 5 years and lived with his parents in a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Los Angeles. With a spacious garden, a pool, and a 3-car garage, anyone looking from the outside would say I had hit the jackpot. I had married a successful man from a wealthy family. My father-in-law, Robert, was a stern man of few words, but every word he spoke weighed a ton. My mother-in-law, Linda, was a petite woman, but her tongue was anything but small, always complaining about the children. In 5 years of marriage, the only thing that made me lower my head in front of her was the topic of kids. We didn't have children. Linda hinted at it often. "What kind of woman are you? 5 years married and not a single baby? At this rate, the family line will end. You should get that checked out, Sarah." I could only grit my teeth, force a smile, and cry silently at night, hugging my pillow. Sometimes the heaviest burden a woman carries isn't the weight of the world, but the empty space where a future is supposed to be, filling a house this big with an echoing silence that screams failure at you every single day. I had tried countless treatments, visited one hospital after another, and the result was always the same. No clear problem observed, continue monitoring. I blamed myself entirely, never daring to think the problem might not be me. In that house, the person I feared most was my father-in-law. The one who exhausted me most was my mother-in-law, and the one I trusted most was my husband, Jason. Or at least, that's what I thought. That night, I was sleeping when thirst woke me up. I reached across the bed and found only a cold void. The sheets on Jason's side were smooth, with no trace of body heat. I rubbed my eyes and looked at the glowing clock on the nightstand. 3:10 a.m. The mansion was plunged in darkness. Only the constant hum of the central air conditioning could be heard. I pushed back the sheets, put on my slippers, and went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. The second-floor hallway was long and dark, with a yellowish nightlight in one corner casting a dim glow. As I passed Jason's home office, I saw a thin line of blue light filtering from under the door. Was he still working? That was my first thought. Lately, his company had a big project and he often complained of exhaustion. Seeing him up so late, I just wanted to tell him to rest, not to make himself sick. I was about to raise my hand to knock on the door, the words ready in my mouth. "Honey, come down for some water and get some rest." But my hand never touched the knob because his familiar voice resonated from inside, deep, but with a honeyed tone he had never used with me. "Don't worry, baby. Tomorrow everything will be resolved. Starting tomorrow, there won't be anyone standing in our way." I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand paralyzed in the air. Baby? Who was he calling baby? My heart was pounding and a chill ran down my spine to the nape of my neck. I swallowed hard, held my breath, and slowly pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door. Jason's voice sounded again, lower this time, with a hint of satisfaction. "I have it all calculated. On that winding pass up the Angeles Crest Highway, if it rains a little, the car skids easily. The police will think it was an accident due to loss of control. No one will suspect a thing." I felt my hands and feet go numb. The highway, a mountain pass, an accident. Tomorrow was our 5th wedding anniversary. He had told me he was taking me to a spa resort in the mountains, a hotel with a view, to make up for the years of sadness over not having children. I, happy to the point of tears, had packed coats and scarves, and had even told my mother-in-law, "Mom, we're going away for a couple of days. Take care of yourselves and don't forget to take your meds." It turned out that anniversary celebration was, in reality, my planned funeral. Inside, a woman's voice sounded through the speakerphone, low but clear, with a touch of flirtation. "But what if she doesn't die? I'm so scared, Jason. I don't want to go to jail." Jason let out a little chuckle. It was the same laugh he had only used in business meetings until now, but now it sounded incredibly sweet to her. "Silly girl. I've looked into it thoroughly. In that ravine, if the car goes over, it gets totaled. Impossible to survive. Once she's gone, the 7,000 square foot house and the millions of dollars in the account, which are in my name, I'll transfer it all to you. You just have to wait quietly to be my wife. You promised me, remember? Don't let me down." The woman on the other end of the line giggled foolishly. Every word, the mansion, the millions, all for you, was like an ice pick driving through my heart. It turned out that to my husband, I was just her. The house I cleaned with care, scrubbing every tile and tending to every plant, was just a number on a piece of paper. 5 years of us, of enduring insults, only to end up being the target of a perfect plan to throw me off a cliff. I covered my mouth tightly, terrified of letting out a scream. I felt my back pressed against the door. Inside, Jason whispered again, "Tomorrow I'll give her a mild sedative. On the mountain pass, she'll be half asleep. If something happens, it will look even more like an accident. You just remember, leave no trace on your phone. Understood? Be a good girl at home and wait for me to bring the papers for you to sign." I couldn't listen anymore. If I did, I would collapse right there. My knees suddenly gave way, and I slid down the cold wall, sitting on the hallway carpet. The carpet was soft, but it felt like I was sitting on sharp blades. In my mind, images swirled. Our wedding day at the luxury hotel, him holding my hand, looking into my eyes and saying, "I will never abandon you." The times my stomach hurt from the treatments, and he would prepare a glass of warm water, saying, "One last effort, honey. Soon we'll have a child." The nights I waited for him until dawn, and he would hug me asking for forgiveness. "I had a business dinner, don't be mad." Was all of that real, or just a long play? In this house, the person I hated and feared most had always been my mother-in-law, Linda. Because of her hints, her inquisitive look at my belly, I often thought in secret, if one day I have to leave this house, it will be because of you. It is a devastating realization when you find out the monster under the bed isn't the one who openly criticizes you, but the one who holds you while you sleep, counting down the hours until he can erase your existence. But it turned out the person who wanted to erase me from this world was the one I slept with every night and had breakfast with every morning. I don't know how long I sat in the hallway. The hum of the AC and the ticking of the wall clock seemed to amplify in the night, digging into my ears. In the office, the light stayed on a while longer and then clicked off. I heard the scraping of a chair and familiar footsteps approaching the door. Like a drowning person suddenly reacting, I ran back to the bedroom. My movements were clumsy. I almost fell several times, but I managed to get to the bed, get under the sheets, and turn my back to the door. The bedroom door opened with a soft click. I heard Jason's steps, slow and calm as always. The mattress sank beside me. The smell of tobacco mixed with his usual cologne approached my back. His arm extended, preparing to hug me as usual. My whole body tensed up, every muscle trembling slightly. "Sarah, you're not asleep yet." His voice was soft, a little husky. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat, trying to imitate a sleepy voice. "I was thirsty. I got up to go to the bathroom. I'm going back to sleep now. You sleep too." Jason was silent for a moment and then withdrew his arm. "Yeah, we leave early tomorrow. Sleep." He turned over, turning his back to me. A few minutes later, his breathing became regular and deep, as if he were truly asleep. I, on the other hand, had my eyes wide open in the darkness, staring at the faint light filtering through the crack in the curtains. I felt a glacial cold all over my body, but my mind had never been so awake. The mountain pass, the accident, the sedatives, the mansion, the millions. Wait for me to bring you the papers. Every word of Jason's, every laugh from that woman was branded into my head with a hot iron. I couldn't cry anymore. The initial tears had soaked the pillow, and as they dried, only a freezing cold remained, spreading through my chest. A deep hate and a painful clarity. Before, I always thought that if I couldn't take it anymore, I would divorce him. I would leave empty-handed. But I would leave. I never imagined someone wouldn't even want to give me the right to live. Outside, the sky began to lighten, turning from a dark purple to a pale gray. Sprinkled by the gold of the first sun, a bird's song in the garden sounded faintly. I remained motionless, pretending to sleep so I wouldn't have to look at the face of the man who had planned my death. Only when a clear thought formed in my head did my body begin to relax slowly. I will take that trip tomorrow, but not to die. I must live. I must protect myself, and I will make them pay for every single thing they have planned against my life. That thought was like a small flame that lit up in the long night, warming my frozen heart. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow on that mountain road, but I knew that from the moment I heard that conversation, I was no longer the submissive and resigned woman. I will live. And I will take back everything that belongs to me in my own way. The next morning, I didn't remember if I had managed to sleep at all. I only know that when the alarm went off, my head felt heavy, like it was full of cotton, but strangely clear. Beside me, Jason was still lying there, eyes closed and breathing rhythmically. If I hadn't heard last night's conversation, I probably would have turned to wake him gently, like so many other mornings. But today, I simply got up in silence, trying not to move the mattress an inch. I went into the bathroom and locked the door, gripping the sink. In the mirror, my face showed sunken eyes, with red rims and dry lips. I stared at myself for a long time and whispered, as if talking to a stranger. My phone was still on the nightstand. Last night, amidst the panic in the hallway, I don't know how I had the clarity to open the recording app and shove the phone into my pajama pocket. When I got back to bed, before pretending to sleep, I had stopped it. Now, sitting on the toilet lid with trembling hands, I opened the audio file. Jason's voice played, word for word, as clear as if he were whispering it in my ear. As soon as she's gone, the house and all the money in the bank will be yours. I listened to it once, and then again. My ears were ringing, but strangely my heart calmed down. It was proof. I hadn't dreamt it. I hadn't imagined it. I saved the file in a hidden folder with a random name and sent a copy to Emily, my best friend, through a messaging app with a single line. Keep this for me. It's urgent. Don't ask anything. I'll call you this afternoon. Emily replied immediately. Sure. Saved. Are you okay? I stared at those 3 words. Are you okay? For a long time, and finally replied. Yes. For the moment, I washed my face with cold water so my eyes would depuff and my voice would stop shaking. When I came out, Jason had just sat up in bed, hair messy, pretending to rub his eyes sleepily. You're up already? He smiled with the same soft voice as always. We leave early today to beat the traffic. I turned so he wouldn't see my gaze, answering simply. Yes. I'm going to get things ready. No need. I've already prepared everything. You just have to grab your toiletries. If it had been yesterday, that sentence would have moved me. A husband who packs the luggage for every trip. Now, I've prepared everything, just gave me chills. I didn't know what exactly he had prepared to end my life. I dressed in comfortable clothes and put on light makeup to hide my fatigue. I opened the closet and chose a cream-colored turtleneck sweater. The same one Jason once told me made me look like a 20-year-old girl. I didn't wear it to please him, but because today I needed to be completely lucid, with every detail under my control. When I went down to the kitchen, Linda was already up, barking orders at the housekeeper to serve breakfast. The smell of toast, fried eggs, and coffee with milk floated in the air. Robert was seated at the head of the table, eyes fixed on the newspaper as usual. Seeing me enter, Linda threw me an indifferent look. You're finally down. Eat something before you go. Traffic in the mountains is a nuisance later on. I nodded and sat down. Jason, coming a few steps behind me, pulled out my chair and placed a plate with the most perfect fried egg in front of me. Eat up, it's a long drive today. I looked at the egg, thinking about the sedative he mentioned last night. My heart skipped a beat, but my face smiled and my voice sounded light. You too, honey. At that moment, Robert folded the newspaper, took off his glasses, and looked at us. What time are you leaving? Jason answered quickly. Dad, I was thinking of leaving around 9. Robert nodded and said slowly, with a tone halfway between advice and warning. The roads in the mountains are treacherous, especially if it rains. Drive carefully, don't get overconfident. One slip and you go down the ravine. My fork trembled in my hand. He was mentioning the mountain pass, the skid, the ravine. Was it a coincidence, or did he know? I glanced sideways at Jason's reaction. He just smiled with a confident attitude. Relax, Dad. I've been driving for over 10 years. I checked the weather. It's going to be sunny today, and the road will be dry. Don't worry, I'll protect Sarah. The word protect resonated in my ears like a cruel joke. I lowered my gaze, cut a small piece of egg, and pushed it to the edge of the plate. Then I took a piece of dry bread and dipped it in the yolk. Today, I had to control everything. I didn't know where he would put the drug, but I promised myself not to touch anything that tasted strange. After a few bites, I put down the fork and rubbed my stomach. Mom, my stomach feels heavy lately. I'll eat light so I don't get carsick. Linda looked at me sideways. She was about to unleash an acidic comment, but seeing her husband's look, she swallowed it and just snorted. Eat what you want, but be careful and come back safe and sound. I stood up and told Jason, Finish eating, I'm going to grab a couple of things and come down. Back in the room, I locked the door. I took a small purse from a drawer and put inside my phone, my passport, some cash, and the audio file I had already copied to a small USB drive in the bathroom. I didn't know how this trip would unfold, but I understood that I could no longer trust anyone in this house. Before going down, I sent another message to Emily. If I don't call you tonight, open that file and take it directly to the police or a lawyer. Trust no one. On the other side appeared a brief typing. And then, okay, waiting for your call. I took a deep breath, put the phone in my jacket pocket, and went down. Jason had already brought down the suitcases and was waiting for me at the door with a smile. Ready, Sarah? Let's go. I nodded. Yes, let's go. In the garage, he opened the car door for me with the same chivalry as the day we got married. I sat in the passenger seat. I buckled my seatbelt tightly and took a quick glance at the cup holder, the thermos, and the box of gum. Anything he offered me today, I would have to think twice about. The car left the estate and merged onto the road. The morning sun in Calabasas was already starting to sting. Jason put on soft music, the same playlist he always played when we went on trips, full of romantic songs. What's wrong? You're very quiet, Jason said, looking at me sideways and smiling. Are you nervous? It's the first time we're going on a trip just the two of us. I turned and forced a smile. I'm a little tired. I didn't sleep well last night. Don't worry, I'm here with you. You're going to love this trip. It'll make you forget all your sorrows. Yes, I'm here with you, which for years was my shelter. Today, it made me nauseous. The emotional whiplash of sitting next to your executioner, who is wearing the mask of your lover, is enough to make you question your own sanity. I turned my face toward the window so he wouldn't see the disgust in my eyes. The freeway was clear. Jason drove confidently and occasionally turned to ask, Do you want water? I shook my head. No thanks. I don't want to have to stop on the road. He didn't insist. A while later, he opened the glove compartment, took out 2 white pills in a blister pack, and gave them to me along with a small bottle of water. These are for motion sickness. A doctor friend gave them to me. Take them so you don't feel bad in the mountains. The pills were in a blister pack with no name or box. My heart was pounding. Did you take some? I asked, trying to sound natural. I don't need them. I'm used to it. He smiled. You take them, that way you sleep for a while, and when we arrive, you'll be good as new. I pretended to hesitate for a moment, and then left the blister pack on the armrest. Better if I take them when we're closer to the mountain pass. If I take them now, I'll wake up halfway there. Jason looked at me, and for an instant, I saw something strange in his eyes, something that disappeared as quickly as it came. He smiled again. As you wish, But remember to take them before we start climbing." I turned away, hiding the hand I was squeezing tightly in my lap. I knew I couldn't take those pills, but I couldn't refuse too obviously either. The sun was rising, the light becoming clearer, and the road began to ascend. Slopes and small forests of intense green could already be seen on both sides. In the distance, the silhouettes of the mountains were outlined, that place I had dreamed of taking quiet trips to with the man I loved. Jason turned down the music volume and cleared his throat. "Sarah, when we start climbing the pass, if you're tired, recline the seat and sleep a little. Really, I hope this trip is a new beginning for us." A new beginning? He said it with such sincerity that, were it not for the audio file in my pocket, I might have believed him. I didn't answer immediately. A while later, I asked, with a casual voice, "Jason, if something ever happened to me, what would you do?" Jason seemed to tense up for an instant over the steering wheel and then laughed. "What things you say! If something happened to you, why would I want to keep living? Come on, don't talk nonsense." I looked at his profile, feeling a strange sensation, as if I were sitting next to a complete stranger. The face was familiar, but his interior was so dark I couldn't recognize him. The car started to leave the freeway to enter a smaller state highway. The sign indicating Angeles National Forest, 75 miles, appeared and was left behind. Suddenly, the phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and saw 3 words on the screen. Mom. My mother-in-law. Why was she calling me at this hour? I looked at Jason. "It's Mom. Pick it up. Put it on speaker if you want," he said, eyes fixed on the road. I pressed the accept button and activated the speaker. "Yes, Mom." On the other end, her usual complaining voice didn't sound, but a choked sob and background noise that sounded like a hospital. "Sarah, is that you, daughter? Where are you? Are you with Jason?" I was startled. "Yes, Mom. We're on our way to the mountains. We just left the city. What's wrong?" Linda's voice broke. "Oh my God! How could this happen? The hospital. They just called me from the hospital. They say my son, that Jason, has had a car accident and has died. They told me to go identify the body. Sarah, what is happening?" "What?" I froze. The phone almost fell from my hands. Beside me, Jason slammed on the brakes. The car screeched, skidded, and stopped abruptly on the shoulder. We both lunged forward. He snatched the phone from my hand, his face pale as wax. "Mom, what are you saying? I'm right here. Who died? What accident?" "Mom, don't talk nonsense." Linda's sobs became louder, mixed with voices of people and a hospital PA system. "They called me. They gave me his full name and the car's license plate. They say my son Jason crashed and the car caught fire. Sarah, Jason, oh my God." I turned to look at Jason. I saw how the veins stood out on his forehead and how his hands gripped the phone until his knuckles turned white. Name, license plate. They were confirming it was Jason. Meanwhile, he was sitting next to me in another car, facing the news of his own death. In that instant, a freezing thought ran through my mind. The plan to kill me on the mountain pass seemed to have suffered a glitch, and the first one to be declared dead was him. Jason kept the phone glued to his ear, face pale and lips trembling. "Mom, listen to me. I'm in the car." "I haven't had any accident. Calm down." But on the other end, Linda's voice was chaos mixed with the murmur of people and the noise of hurried steps. "They gave me his full name and the license plate. A car that is in your name. The doctor is waiting. Mom is coming there right now. Oh my God." The call cut off abruptly. The air inside the car became so dense it felt like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water in the middle of noon. The car engine kept running with a slight rattle, but the 2 of us were petrified. Jason turned to look at me with an expression of bewilderment I had never seen on him before. "Sarah, did you hear what Mom said? Who? Who died?" I looked at him, feeling a mixture of coldness and cruel clarity. I answered slowly. "I heard perfectly. She said you died." Jason let out a dry laugh, a sound that got stuck in his throat. "What stupidity! I'm sitting here. How can I be dead?" He started the car and stepped on the accelerator hard. The car left the shoulder but barely traveled a few yards before slowing down again and stopping. His hands started to shake, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Impossible. It can't be a coincidence like this. I looked at his profile with a frozen heart. The man who last night was calmly planning how to kill me in a ravine was now terrified at the news of his own death. An idea lit up in my mind, clear as water. Someone had beaten him to it, and that someone was either the woman on the phone or someone from his own family. I faked a trembling voice. Maybe Mom misunderstood. Maybe only the name and part of the license plate match. Jason nodded repeatedly, as if clinging to a burning nail. Yes, that's it. It has to be a coincidence. Everything can't be the same. Nothing happened to me. But not even he seemed to believe his words. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. It was a call from an internal hospital number. Jason looked at the screen. His hand stopped for an instant in the air, and then he answered. Hello? On the other end, a male, serious voice. Mr. Jason? This is the ER doctor from the General Hospital. Excuse me, could you come here immediately? We have a traffic accident victim. And all the vehicle documentation is in your name. His relatives just arrived for identification. Jason went rigid, voice broken. It's me. I'm talking to you right now. I haven't had any accident. What are you saying? The doctor on the other end paused and then said slowly, We are calling according to the vehicle registration information. The victim is severely burned. Identification is very difficult. The family insists the victim is their son, meaning you. If you are alive and somewhere else, you must come to the hospital immediately to clarify the situation. The call ended in a suffocating silence. Jason dropped the phone, staring blankly ahead, chest heaving as if he lacked air. I clearly saw cold sweat beading on his forehead. Sarah, someone is using my car. I looked at him, feeling a chill. The crashed car was in his name. The dead person inside was so burned they couldn't be recognized. And at the hospital, his family already assumed it was him. Someone had prepared a substitute death for him. At that moment, I remembered the words Jason said last night to that woman. In that ravine, if the car goes over, it gets totaled. Impossible to survive. A perfect plan. Only the person who had fallen into the ravine wasn't me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. And now, what do you plan to do? Jason grit his teeth, his face taking on a frigid tone. We have to go back, straight to the hospital. I can't let this become reality. The car turned around immediately. The road to the mountains, which we had just started traveling, was left behind. The vehicle accelerated, the engine roaring with urgency. Soft music no longer played inside, only the noise of the engine and the beating of our hearts. During the drive back, Jason didn't stop making calls. He called my mother-in-law, but no one answered. He called my father-in-law, but the phone was off. He called his private driver, but the number wasn't available. He even called the other woman, but only heard the message that the phone was off or out of coverage. Every unanswered call was like a dagger deepening the anxiety in his eyes. I remained silent beside him, my mind a mess. A series of questions assaulted me. Who had killed Jason on paper? Where had that crashed car come from? Who was the dead person? And most importantly, if Jason had been declared dead, was his plan to kill me in the mountains still standing? Or was I now also part of a much bigger trap? The irony wasn't lost on me. I was strapped into a speeding car next to a man who wanted me dead, racing to prove he was alive, while I silently prayed for a way out of this twisted wreckage of a life. When we approached the hospital, the traffic of people and ambulances was much denser. From afar, I saw Linda's figure sitting on a plastic chair in front of the ER entrance, hair messy, hands on her head. Beside her, Robert, face pale and shoulders slumped, as if carrying a heavy slab. Jason slammed on the brakes, opened the door, and ran out of the car. I followed him. "Dad! Mom!" he shouted. Linda lifted her head sharply. The moment she saw Jason standing in front of her, she froze, as if struck by lightning. Her eyes opened wide. Her lips trembled. Jason! Oh my God! She stood up stumbling and ran to hug her son, crying and hitting his back. Are you really alive? Then who? Who is in there? Robert also approached, his usually stern eyes now red. He put a hand on Jason's shoulder, voice hoarse. "If you are here, it means the one inside isn't you." Jason nodded, face tense. "Nothing happened to me, Dad, but clearly someone used my car to cause an accident." I stood a little further back, watching the parents hug their son amidst tears. I felt no warmth, only a coldness that intensified. I understood that in that moment, for them, Jason's life was everything. I was still a stranger, a daughter-in-law on the sidelines. The attending physician from before came out, looked at Jason and then his report with an expression of astonishment. "Are you Jason?" Jason nodded. The doctor let out a long sigh. "Then the person in the ER is not you." "But all the car documentation, the ID, everything is in your name." "It's possible they are fake documents or someone staged the scene deliberately." Linda collapsed again, voice broken. So? Someone wants to hurt my son?" The doctor didn't answer directly. He only said the matter required police intervention. Hearing the word police, I saw Jason shudder slightly. A shadow of uneasiness crossed his gaze, but he quickly recovered his composure. However, I had seen it. I understood that if they investigated thoroughly, not only would the fake accident come to light, but sooner or later someone would discover his plan in the mountains. The police didn't take long to arrive. They cordoned off the area of the burnt car, took photos, and collected testimonies. They invited Jason to a private room to interrogate him. Before going, he turned and looked at me. His look was no longer the kind one from the morning, nor the bewildered one from when he received the news. In his eyes, I saw a cold calculation beginning to resurface. Suddenly, I understood. For him, this game of life or death had just begun. While Jason gave his statement to the police, I stayed with his parents in the hallway. Linda hadn't fully recovered yet and gripped my hand tightly, voice broken. "Daughter, you saw everything. I almost lost my son." I looked at her trembling hand, feeling a deep irony. Last night, the same son she was holding now had planned every step to lead me to death. But I said nothing. I only answered softly, "Yes, Mom. Everything will be cleared up." At the end of the hallway, the ER doors opened and they brought out a gurney covered with a white sheet. Under that sheet was the person who had died instead of Jason. I followed the gurney with my gaze, feeling a coldness that paralyzed me. Who was that person? Why did they have to die like that? And did their death have a direct relation to the woman on the phone? At that moment, I had a certainty. Since Jason was declared dead, the fate of all of us had taken a different course. And that trip to the mountains, which had been left halfway, not only hadn't ended, but would trigger a series of much more terrible events. I looked at the door of the room where Jason was with the police and thought to myself, "You wanted me to die in a ravine, but now it is you who finds yourself at a crossroads of life and death." Jason was in the room with the police for almost an hour before coming out. When the door opened, I looked up and met his gaze. The initial bewilderment had disappeared, replaced by a forced calm, that of someone trying to regain control. My father-in-law jumped up. "What happened, son? What did the police say?" Jason shook his head, voice hoarse. "They just took the initial statement, Dad. The car is in my name, the documents too, so they need to verify everything very carefully. For now, they haven't reached any conclusion." My mother-in-law grabbed his hand tightly. "Then, who is the dead person, son?" Jason lowered his head in silence for a few seconds before answering. "It's unknown, Mom. He's almost unrecognizable from the fire. We have to wait for the DNA test." Hearing that, I saw Linda collapse into the chair, face as pale as if all her blood had been drained. I approached to hold her. The moment my hand touched hers, I felt a strange compassion. Compassion for a mother who was on the verge of losing her son, without knowing that same son had planned to take the life of her daughter-in-law. The police suggested Jason not leave the city temporarily to collaborate in the investigation. The trip to the mountains was officially canceled. Jason drove back home. The car went slower than on the way out, and the atmosphere inside was heavy. No one said a word. Upon arrival, the spacious mansion felt strangely cold. As soon as the door closed, my mother-in-law let herself fall onto the sofa, bringing a hand to her forehead and murmuring, Oh my God, what is happening? What is all this? My father-in-law, leaning on the back of the sofa, told Jason in a grave voice, "Go up and rest, son. Your mother is very upset. Whatever it is, we'll talk tomorrow." Jason nodded and turned to me. "Sarah, you go up and rest too. You must be exhausted." I looked at him and nodded slightly, without saying anything. Upon reaching the room and closing the door, I felt my strength abandon me. I leaned against the door and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. In a single morning, everything had turned upside down. His plan to kill me hadn't been executed because he himself had been declared dead by a substitute. I understood that what I knew was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind Jason, behind the woman on the phone, there was another hand, more discreet, more cruel, and willing to kill to achieve its goal. The phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Emily. "I listened to the file you sent me. Sarah, where are you? Did something happen?" I swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. "I'm not dead yet, but everything is chaos. I'll call you tonight and tell you everything." "Be very careful, Sarah. What you sent me is no joke." I hung up, put the phone away, and went into the bathroom. In the mirror, it was still me, but my look was different. It was no longer that of a gullible, submissive, and scared woman. Now, in my eyes, there was a vigilance that didn't rest. I had just changed when I heard knocking at the door. "Sarah," it was my mother-in-law's voice. I opened the door. She was there, eyes puffy and a cup of hot herbal tea in her hand. "Drink this, daughter." "Haven't you eaten anything all day?" I took the cup, saying quietly, "Thanks, Mom." She looked at me for a long time and suddenly burst into tears. "Sarah, I almost lost my son. I thought Jason was really dead." I stood motionless, the liquid in the cup trembling with the rhythm of my hand. "Mom, if today the person in the accident had been me, what would you think?" The question escaped me, surprising myself. Linda froze for a second and then shook her head. "What are you saying? Jason and you are husband and wife." "It's a misfortune. I don't even dare to think about it." Her answer was ambiguous. I understood that in her heart, her son would always be the center. I, even though I had been her daughter-in-law for 5 years, would always be on the periphery. She put a hand on my shoulder. "Go on, rest. These days are going to be very complicated for the family." She turned around and left. I followed her with my gaze, feeling a sense of emptiness. Dinner was served, but almost no one ate. My father-in-law tried a couple of bites and left the silverware. My mother-in-law was absent, sighing occasionally. Jason didn't take his eyes off his phone, constantly receiving and making calls. I noticed that every time the phone rang, his gaze tensed. When he thought no one was looking, he went out to the balcony and spoke for a long time. Around 9, he returned to the room. As soon as he closed the door, he approached me. Instinctively, I took a step back. "Sarah, were you very scared today?" he asked, voice deep, trying to show concern. I looked at him, forcing myself to stay calm. "Anyone would be scared hearing their husband has died." He sighed, bringing a hand to his forehead. "I never thought the day would come when I would receive the news of my own death." "Sarah, it seems someone is coming for me." A bitter smile formed in my mind. It wasn't that someone was coming for him, it was that he himself had started this game, but aloud I only said, "I just hope everything clears up soon." "I'm very tired." Jason looked at me. His eyes darkened for an instant, and then he nodded. "Rest." That night, I didn't sleep. The wind whispered in the garden, and the sound of insects increased my unease. Through the window, I saw the light on his office balcony was still on. He was awake again. Near 1 in the morning, my phone vibrated softly. It was a message from an unknown number. "If you want to know who died instead of your husband, tomorrow at 7 in the coffee shop opposite the hospital. Come alone. Don't tell anyone." My heart shrank. I read the message several times. In my mind appeared the face of the woman from the call, but my instinct told me whoever sent the message wasn't her. I looked toward where Jason was. The balcony light projected a thin line into the room. He remained absorbed in his secret calls, unaware that another door in this story was about to open. I deleted the message, put the phone away, and closed my eyes. I no longer felt a diffuse fear, but a cold expectation. I knew that starting tomorrow, I wouldn't just be the prey, but I would also start hunting. The next morning, I woke up at 5 when the sky was still covered by fog and the air in the room was unusually cold. Beside me, Jason was still sleeping with his back to me. His face, in the dim light, seemed peaceful, as if the terrible news of his death hadn't happened. If it weren't for the message on my phone, I would have wondered if everything yesterday was real or a nightmare. I got out of bed in silence, with stealthy steps so as not to wake him. In the bathroom, I washed my face for a long time to keep myself awake. The unknown message appeared on the screen again. 7, alone, at the coffee shop opposite the hospital. Not another word. Whoever had sent it knew my schedule. They knew I was near the hospital. I squeezed the phone. If I didn't go, maybe I would never know who died instead of Jason. If I went, I wasn't sure I could return whole. I put on simple clothes, a thin jacket, and went out with my purse. In the kitchen, my mother-in-law was already up, making tea. Seeing me, she looked up. "Where are you going so early?" I tilted my head, voice soft. "I'm going to buy something for breakfast." She nodded without asking further questions. Probably, in her mind, there was only room for worry about her son. I left the mansion under the pale light of dawn, heart beating faster with every step. The coffee shop was right across from the hospital. It was small and almost empty. I chose a table in a secluded corner with my back to the window. The wall clock marked 7 on the dot. I had barely sat down when a middle-aged man sat across from me. He must have been over 50. He was thin, with dark skin and a sharp but tired gaze. He didn't order anything. He just stared at me. "Are you Sarah?" I nodded, unable to hide my suspicion. "Are you the one who sent me the message?" Slowly, he took a photograph out of his jacket pocket and slid it toward me. I looked at it and felt my heart stop. In the photo was a young man, face burnt, but I instantly recognized the shirt he was wearing. It was the same one Jason had once used for a business dinner. "The man who died yesterday was my nephew," he said with a hoarse voice. "His name was Kevin." I was left speechless. "Why was your nephew wearing my husband's clothes? Why was he driving a car in his name?" I asked, voice trembling. He sketched a sad smile. "Because someone paid him to die in his place." The words, "die in his place," were like a frozen stab in my chest. I pressed my lips together, trying to stay calm. "Who was it?" He looked at me closely and said slowly, "Your own husband." I felt myself collapsing. Although I was prepared for anything, hearing it from someone else's mouth was like having my heart torn out. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "Jason met with my nephew last week. He had a lot of debts. The loan sharks had him cornered. Jason promised to pay all his debts in exchange for a job. Dress like the photo on the ID, drive a car in Jason's name, and cause an accident on the Angeles Crest Highway." I shuddered. "Do you have proof?" He sighed, took out his phone, and played a recording. Jason's voice was heard clearly, negotiating every detail with Kevin. I listened with my ears ringing and a lump in my throat. Why is he doing this? His eyes turned red. "So my nephew doesn't die in vain. Jason planned to use my nephew's death as a cover to then do something else." "What thing?" He looked directly at me. His voice became graver. "Yesterday, my nephew heard him talking on the phone with that woman. He didn't just want to fake his own death, he also wanted to kill you." I closed my eyes tightly, breath shallow. Kevin's soul, his death, and my life, everything had been united in a plan of chilling coldness. "And what do you want from me?" I asked. "My nephew is dead." An expression of pain crossed his face. "But I don't want the culprit to go on living peacefully. You are his next target. If you die, his crimes will be buried forever." I clenched my hands, voice hoarse. "What do you want me to do?" "Collaborate with me. Report him. Let's bring everything to light. I've already handed the evidence to the police, but your testimony about the plan in the mountains, about the other woman, will be the key piece." I remained silent. In my mind appeared the image of my mother-in-law crying inconsolably at the hospital, my father-in-law standing in the hallway, and Jason, the man who once was everything to me. If I did what this man asked, everything would crumble. But if I didn't, Kevin would have died in vain. I would live in fear. And who knows, maybe that fateful mountain pass would still be waiting for me. I looked at him and nodded slowly. Okay. He observed me for a long time, as if wanting to etch my face in his memory, and then stood up. The police will contact you soon. From now on, be very careful. Jason isn't the type to give up easily. Having said that, he turned around and left the coffee shop. I was left alone, in front of a cup of cold coffee. Outside, traffic was heavy. The hospital remained a noisy world, oblivious to my own struggle between life and death. I returned home, entering through the door with the most serene face I could fake. In the living room, Jason was talking to his parents. Seeing me, he looked up and gave me his usual tender smile. You're back from shopping? I looked at him, feeling a storm inside, but nodded silently. Breakfast passed heavily. My father-in-law barely tasted a bite. My mother-in-law almost didn't eat. Jason showed himself more attentive than ever, serving me food, asking if I was tired. Every one of his gestures only provoked nausea in me. Near noon, my phone vibrated, a short message from an unknown number. We have enough evidence. Get ready. The first to be summoned will be your husband. My heart raced. I looked up at Jason. He was on the balcony talking on the phone, a slight smile on his lips. Probably he still believed he had everything under control. I understood one thing. This game was no longer a simple chase. It was a battle between truth and crime, between a woman who once was submissive and a man capable of trading lives for money and freedom. That night, when everyone slept, I stood in the room, hand on my belly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel despair over not being able to have children, but a clear determination. If I survived all this, I would live a different life. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. I only knew that since I left that coffee shop, Jason's fate and mine were officially on opposite fronts. That night, I barely slept. The sound of the balcony door creaking in the wind was enough for my heart to shrink. I was lying on my side, back to Jason, listening to his slow and regular breathing, as if the horrible events of the last few days had nothing to do with him. I realized the man who had shared 5 years of marriage with me was now a complete stranger sleeping in my same bed. Almost at dawn, my phone vibrated very softly. A short message. At 9, the police will summon Jason again. I stared at the screen for a long time and then turned it off in silence. I no longer felt just fear, but the sensation of being on the final threshold of a stage of my life. On one side, 5 years of submissive marriage. On the other, the cold truth about to come to light. Jason woke up later than usual. When he opened his eyes, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, pretending to read news on my phone. You got up so early? He asked with a sleepy voice. Yeah? Just habit. He sat up, stretched, and looked at me for a few seconds before smiling. You've lost weight these days. I didn't answer. I've lost weight from fear, from disgust, from having to act every minute of every day. Do you know that? But I only said quietly, must be the tiredness from these days. Downstairs, my father-in-law was already sitting at the tea table. My mother-in-law was also up, but with a haggard face and deep dark circles. She still hadn't recovered from the shock. Robert looked at Jason and said in a grave voice, Did the police call you again, son? Jason stopped for an instant before shaking his head. No, Dad, I guess they'll take a few days. I lowered my head to pour myself water and hide my look. I knew he was lying, and he didn't know I knew. Around 8, while we were having breakfast, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper went to open it. 2 police detectives were at the door. Is Mr. Jason home? The room went silent. My mother-in-law dropped her utensils. My father-in-law jumped up. Jason remained motionless for a few seconds before getting up slowly. Here I am. A detective showed him a summons. We need you to accompany us to clarify some details about the accident the other day. Linda paled and grabbed her son's hand. Officers, why are you taking him again? He wasn't in that car. The detective responded calmly. Precisely for that reason we need to clarify it, ma'am. Jason turned to look at his father and then at me. His gaze stopped on me for an instant longer. I clearly saw suspicion in his eyes. Maybe he was starting to doubt. Not that his plan had been discovered, but me, the woman he thought he had under his control. I'll be right back. Don't worry, Dad, Mom, he said. My mother-in-law burst into tears. "Son, remember to tell them everything." "You haven't done anything wrong." I was behind her, watching Jason leave with the two officers. When the car door closed, I felt as if the invisible noose that had oppressed my neck for days began to loosen. The house plunged into a heavy silence. My father-in-law sat dejected by the tea table. My mother-in-law wouldn't stop praying and murmuring. I asked for permission to go up to my room. In the familiarity of my bedroom, I sat on the bed and with trembling hands opened my phone. A call from an unknown number. I answered. "Sarah, the police are interrogating Jason." "He denies everything." It was the man's voice from the other day. "Get ready. They can call you at any moment." "I'm ready," I replied quietly. I stared at our wedding photo hanging on the wall. In it, Jason wore a suit and I, a white dress. We were smiling happily. Anyone would say it was the beginning of a quiet life. No one knew that behind that smile, one day I would have to testify against my own husband. At noon, my phone rang again. This time, it was the police. "Mrs. Sarah, could you come to the station immediately?" I looked toward the door. Downstairs, I could hear my mother-in-law coughing. I took a deep breath and answered. "Yes, I'm coming right now." See, I lied to Linda, telling her I was going to buy her some vitamins. She didn't ask more. Her mind was only with her son. I left the house on my own 2 feet without looking back. At the station, they took me to an interrogation room. Jason was sitting on the other side of the table. Seeing me enter, his face hardened. Clearly, he didn't expect them to call me. A detective said, "Today, we have invited Mrs. Sarah to clarify certain information. We hope you collaborate." Jason turned to me, voice icy. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "Calm down, because there are things I can no longer hide." The atmosphere became dense, like a slab on my chest. I took the small USB drive out of my purse and put it on the table. "This is the audio file of your conversation with that woman the other night." Jason's face changed completely. He jumped up. "What are you saying?" A detective indicated for him to sit down and connected the USB to the computer. The recording played, every word familiar and cold. "As soon as she's gone, the house and all the money in the bank will be yours." Jason's face turned livid. His hands clenched so hard his veins stood out. I continued, voice trembling but clear. "The person who died in your place was Kevin, this gentleman's nephew." I told everything I knew, from the message to meet at the coffee shop, the conversation with Kevin's uncle, to the recording of the agreement between Jason and him. With every word, Jason's face paled a little more. Finally, he let out a bitter laugh. "And you believe all that before your own husband?" I looked at him for a long time. In that instant, the image of the man I once loved vanished like smoke. "I trusted you until I heard you with my own ears planning my death." The room plunged into silence. A detective addressed Jason. "Mr. Jason, with this evidence, you can no longer deny it. We ask that you collaborate." Jason lowered his head and remained silent for a long time. When he lifted it, there was no longer anger in his eyes, only the desperation of someone who was cornered. I stood up, legs shaking. "Jason, I didn't want you to die, but I couldn't die in your place either, as you had planned." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a glimmer of something resembling regret, but it was too late. I left the room, heart pounding. In the hallway, the midday light entered through the window, so bright it dazzled me. I stood there a long time, feeling like I had just amputated a part of my life. I didn't know what fate awaited Jason behind that door. I only knew that the moment I put that USB on the table, I had officially buried my marriage in exchange for the right to live. I left the station as the sun was setting. The sunlight stretched over the trees, casting long shadows on the gray asphalt. I stopped for a moment, breathing deeply, as if I had to learn to breathe again after having ended a part of my life. Behind that door, Jason was still testifying. The man who was my husband, my support, was now a suspect in his own plot. The phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from the unknown number. "Thank you. My nephew will finally rest in peace." I stared at the message for a long time and replied, "I'm sorry everything came so late." There was no further response. I took a cab home. During the whole ride, my mind was blank. Through the window, familiar streets passed like frames of my life. The route I took every morning with Jason to go to work, the small hill where I once sat on his motorcycle as newlyweds, the bakery where he bought me the first cake to celebrate my arrival into the family. Everything seemed so close, but it already belonged to someone else. The door of the mansion opened. My mother-in-law was waiting for me in the living room. As soon as I entered, she jumped up, voice altered. "You're back!" "Daughter, why did you take so long? And Jason? Where is he?" I froze. I had thought about this moment the whole way, but facing it, I felt my heart constrict. "Jason is at the station, Mom." Linda stopped for an instant and then grabbed my hand tightly. "Again? Didn't they take him this morning? Why hasn't he come back?" I lowered my head. I couldn't keep lying. "Why?" "Because the police have new evidence. Jason is in preventive detention for further investigation." The words preventive detention were like a lightning bolt. My mother-in-law stepped back, stumbling, and had to grab the sofa to not fall. "What are you saying?" My father-in-law entered from the garden and, hearing the last words, stopped dead. "Preventive detention? What does that mean?" The air in the room became unbreathable. I knew that whatever I said, it would be like a knife for this family, but the truth would eventually come out. Slowly, I told everything. From hearing the call that night, the recording, Kevin's death instead of Jason's, and the investigation for attempted murder. With every sentence, my father-in-law's face darkened and my mother-in-law's paled more and more. When I finished, a sepulchral silence filled the room. My father-in-law let himself fall onto the sofa, trembling hands interlaced. After a long while, he managed to say in a hoarse voice, "So, he wanted to kill you?" I nodded, tears falling without me realizing. "Yes, if it hadn't been for Kevin's death, the person on that gurney today could have been me." My mother-in-law broke into inconsolable crying. She no longer beat her chest or invoked the heavens like at the hospital. She collapsed onto the table, crying like someone who has lost everything. "Oh my God, he's crazy! How could he do that to his own wife?" My father-in-law lifted his head and looked at me with an expression of pain and sorrow. "Sarah, I ask for your forgiveness. I didn't know how to raise him." I shook my head with a lump in my throat. "It's not your fault, Robert. I didn't imagine he would become this either." Suddenly, my mother-in-law lifted her head, eyes bloodshot. "Do you still love him, Sarah?" The question squeezed my heart. I loved the Jason of the early years, the decent man who held my hand. But the man who tried to kill me, I could no longer call that love. I lowered my head, sincere. "I loved him very much, but now I just want to live." Linda collapsed again, unable to say more. That night, the house was plunged into absolute silence. Jason's footsteps were no longer heard in the hallway, nor his voice calling me. Only my father-in-law's sighs from his office and my mother-in-law's intermittent sobs behind her door. Lying in bed, I looked at the ceiling, feeling an immense void. On one side, a family destroyed by a detained son. On the other, me, the wife who had just pushed her husband into jail to save her life. I didn't know who suffered more, only that nothing would ever be the same again. Almost at midnight, my phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "Jason has been formally charged with attempted murder and identity theft resulting in death. Legal proceedings will begin in the coming days." I read the message with shaking hands. Although I was prepared, the word charged hurt like a tear. The next morning, they called me again to expand my statement. When I returned, it was already night. Upon entering, I saw my mother-in-law sitting in the living room. She stood up and approached slowly. I thought she would blame me, that she would hate me, but no. She just looked at me, voice hoarse. "Pack your bags." I froze. "What are you saying, Mom?" She turned to hide her emotion. "This house is no longer a quiet place. You are the wife of a man who is going to be judged. You will suffer a lot here. Go back to your parents' house for a while." I looked at her, feeling a knot in my chest. I understood she wasn't kicking me out. She was protecting me the only way she could. "And Jason?" I asked quietly. She closed her eyes, tears escaping. "He will have to pay for what he has done. I can no longer save him." I went up to my room and packed some things. Every object I picked up was a memory. The shirt he gave me for my birthday, the scarf I put on him when he had a fever. Everything was now fragments of a broken memory. When I went down, my father-in-law was waiting for me at the door. He looked at me for a long time and said quietly, "Sarah, I can't keep you." "But whatever happens, you were always my daughter-in-law." I bowed my head deeply. "Thank you, Robert." My mother-in-law gave me an envelope. "Here is some money. Take it for your expenses." "I can't help you more." I shook my head. "I can't accept it." She put it in my hand firmly, voice broken. "Take it. At least this way my conscience will weigh a little less." I didn't refuse anymore. I hugged her. For the first time in 5 years, we hugged like two women who had fallen together into the same abyss. Leaving through that door, I knew I wasn't just leaving a house, but a whole life. A marriage destroyed without possibility of repair. Outside, the sky was darkening and the streetlights were turning on. I dragged my suitcase down the familiar driveway leading out of the estate, feeling strangely light, as if I had just let go of a load I had carried for 5 years. I didn't know what tomorrow would be like, but I knew that from that moment, I was no longer Jason's wife. I was just Sarah, a woman who had just lost her husband, her house, and her past in exchange for the right to live. I arrived at my parents' house well into the night. The small street remained the same, with the yellow light of the street lamps on the peeling walls. The smell of late dinner and wood smoke mixed into a familiar aroma that moved me. In front of the door, my mother was sitting on a low chair, fanning herself with an old wicker fan. Seeing me with the suitcase, she jumped up, eyes wide open. "Sarah, what are you doing here at this hour?" Before I could answer, tears sprang forth. I entered the patio, dropped the suitcase, and ran to hug her. "I'm back, Mom." My mother froze for a second and then hugged me tightly. I felt her thin, trembling hand on my back. "Why are you crying like that?" "And Jason? Why are you alone?" The noise woke my father. He came out of the house and, seeing me, stopped. "Sarah?" I wiped my tears, trying to regain composure. "Yes. I've come to stay with you guys for a while." A simple sentence, but my parents understood something grave had happened in my marriage. My mother didn't insist. She took me inside and gave me a glass of warm water. My father sat across from me, looked at me for a long time, and then asked calmly, "What happened? Tell us." I told them everything. Since the night I heard the call, the plan to kill me, Kevin's death, Jason's arrest, the charges. With every word, my father's face darkened. My mother, beside me, gripped the glass so hard the water trembled. When I finished, a suffocating silence filled the house. Long after, my father let out a long sigh. "Oh, God, he dared to go that far." My mother broke into crying, a choked sob. "My daughter, they almost killed you. Why do you have to suffer so much?" Sitting between my parents, head bowed, I felt I had traveled a very long and dark road to finally find the way back home. That night, I slept in my old room, with the same pale yellow walls and the wooden bed that creaked with every movement. Everything was so simple it made me emotional. I looked at the ceiling for a long time, with Jason's face at the station engraved in my mind. I no longer hated him like at the beginning. I only felt a deep exhaustion, like someone who has just survived a great storm. The following days, they called me several times to expand my statement. My parents took me and picked me up. My mother held my hand while we waited in the station hallway, as if fearing that if she let go, life would drag me away again. One afternoon, upon leaving, I ran into my father-in-law at the door. He had lost a lot of weight. His back seemed more hunched. Seeing me, he stopped a second before approaching. "Sarah." I bowed my head. "Hello, Robert." He looked at me. His lips moved several times before he could speak. "I just wanted to ask you." "Do you still hate him?" I kept silent. Hate him? I had hated him to the point of not being able to breathe. But now, after everything, I only felt pain. "I don't want him to die, Robert, but I can't carry his guilt either." My father-in-law nodded, eyes red. "I understand. I don't blame you." He turned around in silence. Seeing his hunched back, I felt a deep sadness. All parents love their children, but some children stray from the path. Days later, the police informed me the woman from the call had been caught trying to flee. Little by little, her identity was revealed. She had been an employee at Jason's company, and their clandestine relationship lasted over a year. It was she who instigated him to plan everything, from the substitute death to my murder in the mountains. Hearing it, I stayed silent. It turns out that for more than a year, while I took treatments to have children and endured my mother-in-law's criticisms, my husband lived another life behind my back. Emily came to see me on a rainy night. She hugged me as soon as she entered. "You are very lucky to be alive, Sarah." I nodded with a sad smile. "Yes, I just realized that." She stayed with me a long time, talking about trivialities to distract me. Before leaving, she took my hand. "What do you plan to do? Divorce, right?" I looked at the dark sky. The rain fell incessantly. "It's no longer an option. It's an obligation." Duh! I knew that since Jason was charged, our marriage had ended, both on paper and in the heart. One morning, I went for a routine medical checkup requested by the police. The doctor called me into her office. After seeing the results, she looked at me with surprise. "Mrs. Sarah, do you know you are pregnant?" I froze. My ears rang, mind blank. "What did you say, doctor?" "You are about 5 weeks along." "It's very early." I collapsed into the chair. A child, arriving just when my marriage broke, just when his father faced prison. Life has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? In the ashes of a burned-down life, a green shoot pushes through. I was carrying the legacy of a man who tried to erase my future. That night, I told my parents. My mother hugged me crying. My father remained silent for a long time before saying calmly, "Do you want to keep it?" I put my hand on my belly, feeling that incipient life, so fragile, a part of me and also of Jason. "Yes, he's not to blame." My father nodded. "Then we will help you raise him." I broke down crying. For the first time, I wasn't crying from fear or rage, but from gratitude for having a shelter. I hadn't told my in-laws. I didn't know if the news would bring them joy or more pain. But I knew this baby was the gift, and also the greatest challenge life was putting in front of me. Outside, the wind blew and the rain fell. But inside me, for the first time in a long time, a small life began to sprout, fragile and strong at the same time. On the day of the trial, I attended as a victim. Emily came too, just like the day she came to see me. My mother held my hand since we left the house, her warm and trembling hand transmitting strength to me. "Don't be afraid. We are here." I nodded. In my belly, the baby seemed to move, a slight reminder that I was no longer alone. The courtroom wasn't big, but for me it was an immense space. On the bench opposite, I saw my in-laws. She had aged notably, with hair almost white and back hunched. Seeing me, her eyes turned red. I greeted her with a nod. She nodded slightly. Then they brought Jason in. I held my breath seeing him. The man who once was tall and elegant in expensive suits now wore the prisoner uniform, gaunt and with a sunken face. When his gaze crossed mine, he stopped. In his eyes, I saw surprise, regret, and finally, a deep despair. I didn't look away. I looked at him, more serene than I expected. The trial began. The evidence was presented, the recording, my testimony, that of Kevin's uncle, the forensic reports, Jason's final confession. When it was his turn for the last word, he stood up, trembling. He looked first at his parents and then at me. "Sarah, I'm sorry." Only 3 words, but they sounded like a whole life breaking apart. "I let greed blind me. I not only betrayed you, I wanted to kill you. I don't deserve to be your husband. I don't deserve to be a son." My mother-in-law broke into tears. My father-in-law closed his eyes, tears furrowing his wrinkled face. Jason turned to me, voice broken. "Sarah, I don't ask you to forgive me. I only ask you, if, someday, the baby—" He choked up. I knew he had guessed it. "Please, let me know, even if only once in life." I neither nodded nor denied. I just looked at him for a long time. In that moment, there was no longer hate or love, only an immense void where once he stood. The verdict was handed down. Jason was sentenced to many years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, manslaughter, and identity theft. When the judge's gavel sounded, I saw my mother-in-law collapse onto my father-in-law's shoulder. He hugged her, the last embrace of two people who had just lost the pillar of their lives. I turned around. I didn't have the courage to look anymore. The day we signed the divorce, the sun was shining brightly. We didn't say a word to each other. A couple of signatures and, officially, I stopped being his wife. As he left, a guard was taking him away. Suddenly, he turned to look at me one last time. In his eyes, there was no longer calculation or threat, only an infinite sadness. I turned around before the tears fell. Days later, my father-in-law came to my parents' house. His back was even more hunched. Seeing me, he stayed silent a while before saying, "Sarah, I want to ask you a favor." I invited him in and served him tea. "Jason told me about the baby." "I don't dare ask you to come back or anything like that. I only ask you if one day, when the child grows up, that you allow his grandmother and me to see him as our grandchild." His eyes turned red. "It's the only thing we have left." I lowered my head for a long time, thinking of my mother-in-law giving me that envelope, of her trembling hug, of her look as I left. "Yes, when he is born, I will let you know." My father-in-law stood up and bowed deeply before me. "Thank you, daughter." When he left, I stayed at the door a long time. There are ties that, although broken, leave a thread so fine it doesn't serve to return, but it does to remember. Time passed slowly, but with a strange peace. I opened a small bakery and cafe across from the house, enough to support me and the baby. My parents took care of me with care. Emily used to visit me and joked, "After the storm, you finally see the sun." I smiled, caressing my belly. The sun I felt now didn't dazzle, it warmed. The day I went into labor, it was pouring rain, just like the night I returned home crying. But this time, my tears were those of a future mother. When I heard the first cry in the delivery room, my heart broke with happiness and pain. A boy, my son. I named him Leo, wishing him to be a lucid person all his life. A few days later, my in-laws came to visit him. My mother-in-law, trembling, took him in her arms. Tears fell on her wrinkled hands. "Hello, little one." "I'm your grandma." I didn't correct her. I understood that in that moment, she only needed to be called Grandma. I didn't tell Jason the exact date of birth. I only asked my father-in-law to pass on a message. "Your son has been born. He is healthy. I will raise him to be a good man. The rest of our lives, let's leave them as they are." I don't know what Jason thought upon receiving the news, but I knew my life, from that moment, had turned to a new page. I was no longer anyone's wife, nor the daughter-in-law of a great family. I was just Sarah, a mother. Sometimes, at night, with Leo sleeping in my arms, I remembered everything that had happened. Not to suffer, but to remind myself I was very close to death and walked out of it on my own 2 feet. Life can snatch a lot from a woman, her youth, her trust, her marriage, but as long as she has life left, as long as she has a small being in her arms, she can always start over, and I had achieved it. 3 years later, one morning, I opened the shop. The sun fell on the threshold. Leo was sitting at the door, hugging an old teddy bear and humming a TV commercial. He looked like me in the eyes, big and bright, but the nose was identical to Jason's. Every time I saw that feature, my heart shrank a little. Then, quickly, I told myself not to look anymore, that the past was closed. "Mom, can I have cookies today?" Leo ran to hug my legs. "If you behave and eat all your dinner, Mom will buy you cookies." He smiled, showing all his teeth, and ran to the patio to play with the cat. My days were now incredibly simple. Opening the shop in the morning, cooking for my parents and Leo at noon, selling a little more in the afternoon, and closing early to sleep hugging my son. There were no more elegant parties, no 7,000-square-foot mansion, no fake handshakes, just my son's voice calling me Mom when he woke up scared. One rainy afternoon, while closing up the shop, my father called me. "Sarah, you have a visitor." I looked up. At the door was my father-in-law. He was much thinner, shoulders slumped and hair almost completely white. Seeing me, he stood still a good while before entering. "Hello, daughter." Hello, Robert. Leo ran over curiously and hid behind me, spying on the stranger. This is Leo, I said quietly. He's your grandpa. My father-in-law froze, looking at Leo without blinking, lips trembling. You are Leo? I nodded. Leo shyly said, Hello, Grandpa. Only that word was enough for my father-in-law to tear up. He raised his hand as if to pet his head, but withdrew it, fearing scaring him. I've come to see you guys. I invited him in. I served him tea. My father-in-law put a small bag on the table. Some toys for the boy. Don't bother, Robert. It's not for you. It's for him. I kept silent. A while later, he said slowly, Jason is serving his sentence. At first he was sunken, but when he knew the child had been born, it seems he started to live with more responsibility. He signed up for a workshop in prison. He says if he ever gets out, the only thing he wishes is to know that you and the boy are okay. I felt a slight pang in my heart, but only that. My father-in-law looked at me and said quietly, I don't dare ask you to forgive him. He closed all the doors himself. I just want you not to embitter your life by hating him. I looked up and looked him in the eyes. I don't hate him anymore, Robert. Simply, I don't feel anything for him anymore. He nodded very slightly. When my father-in-law left, Leo ran after him and gave him a candy. Here, Grandpa. My father-in-law stopped, bent down to take the candy with a trembling hand, and thanked him. His hunched back was lost in the rain. I stayed at the door a long time. That night I asked Leo, Did you like Grandpa? Yes. He was sad, he said, with a childish sincerity that left me thoughtful. Months later, through my father-in-law, Jason sent me a letter. The handwriting was shaky, no longer as neat as before. Sarah, I don't dare ask for forgiveness. I just want to tell you I've understood what it means to pay for your acts. Every night in prison I dream of you and the boy, but I know it's a dream I no longer have a right to. I just hope you are well. I finished reading and folded the letter slowly. I didn't answer, not out of resentment, but because I knew our paths were already different. There are things that once broken cannot be put back together. On Leo's first day of school, he didn't want to let go of my hand. Mom, come with me. Go into class. Mom waits for you at the door. He pressed his lips together and, eyes watery, entered. When the door closed, I stayed in the hallway, feeling a small part of me leaving my side. That night, Emily appeared at the shop. Sarah, have you thought about rebuilding your life? What do you mean? I mean a woman has the right to be happy a second time. I laughed. I am already happy. She looked at me for a long time and nodded. Yes, happy in your own way. That night, I hugged Leo while he slept, feeling an immense peace. I no longer feared the night. I was no longer startled by secret calls. I no longer lived in a huge and cold mansion. I lived in a small and warm house. There are scars that never disappear, but you learn to live with them without them hurting. Jason was a scar in my life, but Leo was the warmth that covered it every day. I walked out of hell on my own 2 feet, and now I walked a different path, without luxuries or riches, but where I was free to be a mother, to be a person. 18 years later, the day Leo received his college acceptance letter, the sun was beautiful. Mom, I got in, he shouted from the door, letter in hand. I ran to him, hands more trembling than his. Really? Yes, computer science. I hugged him, and for the first time in many years, I cried like a girl. That night, Leo sat beside me on the porch. Mom, I want to ask you something. What was my father like? I kept silent a long while. Your father was once the person I trusted most. Are you angry with him? I smiled slightly. Before, yes, now no longer. Can I see him? I turned to look at him. His face looked so much like Jason's in that moment. Do you want to see him? He nodded, very serious. I don't want to blame anyone. I just want to know where I come from. I took a deep breath. If you want, I won't stop you. The visit to the prison was a morning of fine rain. When Jason came out, I barely recognized him. He was much thinner, shoulders slumped in premature wrinkles. But seeing Leo, his eyes lit up. Hello, Dad, Leo said, bowing his head. Only those 2 words were enough for Jason to break down crying. You're so tall. Are you okay? Leo asked. Staying alive is enough. I stayed back, observing them. All the hate and fear of yesteryear felt suddenly very distant. Jason turned to me. Sarah, you have raised a wonderful son. I just nodded, because he is my son. Before leaving, Leo said goodbye. I don't know what you did in the past, Dad, but I hope starting today you try to live better. Jason nodded repeatedly, unable to stop crying. I promise you. Back home, Leo told me. Mom, now I understand why you chose to live like this. I smiled at him. You don't blame me? No. I'm proud of you. Those words made my heart tremble. I thought I was just a lucky survivor, but for my son, I was a mother to feel proud of. And that was enough for a whole lifetime. The day Leo married Lucy, a sweet girl from a humble family, the wedding was simple, right in our backyard. My father-in-law came and watched from a corner in silence. During the ceremony, Leo knelt before me. Mom, thank you for raising me to be a man. I lifted him up, tears running down my cheeks. Living with decency is the best gift you can give me. A year later, my granddaughter was born. Leo ran home shouting, Mom, I'm a father! I held the little girl in my arms, hands trembling. Life is a strange circle. I was a woman almost murdered by her husband, gave birth in loneliness, and now held my granddaughter amidst laughter and tears of happiness. My father-in-law died a few years later. Before he left, I visited him in the hospital. I forgave him, and he asked for my forgiveness. Jason got out of prison eventually. My father-in-law told me he had opened a small car repair shop on the outskirts. He lived in silence. We never saw each other again. Some encounters are better left in memory. One afternoon, sitting on the porch with my granddaughter sleeping in my lap, I felt at peace. I had gone through hell. I had been on the verge of death. But in the end, I had completed a cycle of pain to return to the simplest thing: family. My name is Sarah. I loved. I was wrong. I almost died. I gave birth in tears. But I also stood up, kept going, and kept the light for a whole life that came after. This is a fictional story, but the line between trusting someone and losing yourself is a boundary we all walk every day. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge, but living well enough to see the sun rise on a quiet, ordinary day.